Hello, everyone. Welcome to my presentation. First, I would like to thank the program committee for including my paper in the program. Also, I would like to apologize for cannot attend the conference on site. So I had to deliver my presentation online using these pre-recorded videos. This is a joint work with Philip Kruger from the University of Geneva, Zach Sonner from Frankfurt School of Finance, and Dragon Tang from the University of Hong Kong. The title of this paper is The Effects of Mandatory ESG Disclosure Around the World. Before we talk about the mandatory ESG disclosure, first let me clarify what's the ESG we are talking about. If we talk about ESG 10 years or 20 years ago, so maybe very few people know that. But nowadays, almost everybody knows what's the ESG, not only in the academia, but also in the industry. Here, E refers to the environment. It's including the climate change, which is related to the carbon emission and carbon footprint, and so on. But it also has more general concepts besides beyond the climate change, such as the water usage, nuclear power, and the soil degradation, and so on. The second part will be the S. S refers to the social. Social means we should not only pay attention to the shareholder protection. We also need to pay more attention to the stakeholders, including the local community, employees, so all the stakeholders that has a relationship with the company. The last one, G, refers to the governance. The governance is one of the traditional topics in finance. It had to be a lot of literature has proved the governance pretty important, including the management structures, executive compensations, employee relationship, and so on. Okay. The common feature of all those informations are non-financial information and non-structured data. When we talk about the ESG, like I explained, so it's very easy to understand intuitively what are the ESG information. But the problem is all the information, most of the information are qualitative, so it's pretty hard to quantify. It's very different from the financial information or the traditional financial information we observed in a balance sheet, income statement, or the cash flow statement. So it's pretty hard to quantify the ESG information because all the information are the non-structured data. But due to the importance of ESG nowadays, so it seems like we have to solve this problem because there is high demand for the ESG information. Here I just collect some information or some media news or surveys to answer to see is the ESG disclosure enough. So according to our previous description, we know that there are lots of difficulties to construct the ESG information. But due to the needs of the ESG information, for example, according to the survey done by the Ellison and Young, they found that about 60% of the respondents refer to the big financial institutions. They believe that the companies don't disclose ESG risks that could affect their business and that they should disclose them more fully. So that means there are huge demands from the institutional investors. And also there are lots of media news. If you search on Google, you'll find the news. Here I just cite a couple of headlines from the Gobi, Thomas Reuters, or Bloomberg. So the point one direction is that the demand for the ESG investing grows. So the investors want to get more information, but the supply seems it's not enough to satisfy those demands. So from the investors, they just want to know more about the ESG information. So driven by those demands, so lots of countries start to mandate the company to disclose the ESG information using the different policies or regulations or standards. So here actually in this studies, we try to compose a comprehensive data set regarding to the country's ESG policies and regulations from a variety of sources. The primary sources we use is the carrots and sticks. The carrots and sticks, this is the public website. So all the information on this website are public available. They collect the policy and regulation regarding to the ESG disclosure from a different country and from different authorities. So besides that, we also use Sustainable Stock Exchange Initiative as a complementary data set. We also collect the information from GRI Initiative for the Responsible Investment. Besides that, we also use the information from the search engines such as the Google, the Bing, and some government agents' websites, stock exchanges, and newspapers to cross-check the accuracy. So after combining all the information together, we are the first to compose a comprehensive data set regarding to the mandatory ESG disclosure. So here, this is just some sample regulations. So in our data set, we just collect the information regarding to country, the year in which the mandatory disclosure regulations are implemented, and the name of the regulations. Here we can see that in the different countries, the authority to issue those kind of policies or regulations are very different. So such as some regulations are issued by the government, some of them are issued by the stock exchange. So in some countries, they also have one option for the companies, which is comply or explain. So we consider, so the presence of the comply or explain allow the firm to explain why they didn't disclose the ESG information. So although they didn't disclose the information, according to their explanation, the investors or the financial analysts still able to get some hints about their ESG performance. So we consider the inclusion of the comply or explain also as a mandatory disclosure. So according to its criteria, by 2017, in our samples, we have 25 out of 52 sample countries require some form of mandatory disclosure of ESG information. Here, this map shows the geographical distribution of the mandatory ESG disclosure regulations. So we can see the mandatory disclosure regulations appears all over the world, including the Europe, the Asia, Australia, even in South Africa and Latin America. But very surprisingly, one of the largest developed countries, such as the US or Canada, they didn't implement the mandatory ESG disclosure. It seems like they are lag of the world. So there are lots of political issues. That's not a concern in this story. So here I just want to give you a big picture regarding to a geographical distribution of mandatory ESG disclosure in your story. Okay, since we just try to examine the real effects of mandatory ESG disclosure on the informational environment. But before doing that, we know that the mandatory ESG disclosure is not a random event. So there should be some reason or should be some driver determined for the mandatory ESG disclosure. So before examining the real effects, we will just try to address the question, what's the country level determinants of mandatory ESG disclosure? In other words, so what kind of countries has a higher likelihood to issue those kind of policies? Then we will examine the real effect of mandatory ESG disclosure firstly on the ESG reports. Because intuitively, the company should disclose, should have more ESG report because the government mandates you to do that. Is this the case? The second question we want to address is what's the effects of mandatory ESG disclosure on the ESG informational environments. So to measure the informational environments, we will just use the three different measures. The first one is accuracy and dispersion of analyst forecast. The second one is the negative ESG incidence. And the third one will be the stock price crash risk, which is proxy for the negative information holding. Based on those research questions, we compose 4 hypotheses in this study. The first one is the availability of the relationship between the availability of ESG reports and mandatory ESG disclosure. So intuitively, after implementation of mandatory disclosure, so the firms had to issue the ESG report to a certain extent if the government asks you to do it. It's a must, okay? So expect to see an increase of the availability of the ESG reports after the implementation of mandatory ESG disclosure regulations. So secondly, for the analyst forecast. So if the country asks the firm to disclose more ESG information, that will just that will facilitate the information flow to the financial analyst. Means a financial analyst will get more information regarding to the ESG performance of the firm, which should increase their forecast accuracy and reduce the dispersion. That's our second hypothesis. Our third hypothesis regarding to the negative ESG incidents. Since we know that after the implementation of mandatory ESG disclosure, the managers has to or must disclose more information regarding to ESG performance of the firm, which will display the managerial behavior to do something bad. Okay, so we should decrease the likelihood to have a negative ESG incidents. So that's why we expect a negative relationship. And the last one will be the negative information hoarding. We use the stock price crash risk to mirror the negative information hoarding. Literature shows that the managers had a tendency to hide the negative information, but they cannot hide those negative information forever. So once accumulated negative information reach a tipping point, all those information will be released to the market all at once, which results in a sharp drop of stock price. We refer it as the stock price crashes. Okay. So if the country, after the implementation of mandatory ESG disclosures, the firm has to disclose more ESG information on a timely manner. So that means this will facilitate the negative information flows, which will reduce the negative information hoarding, which is associated with a lower likelihood of stock price crashes. Okay, so that's four key hypotheses we will examine using our samples. So before showing you the results, let me just show you the data we are using very quickly. The first one is the ESG report. We use the combination of the GRI and the AFAANZ-Rui database. We all know that GRI is just the global reporting initiative. So they have a database just to collect the ESG report. AFAANZ-Rui also collects the ESG report information. They have the variable to indicate whether this report complies to the GRI standards. So we use a report whether compliant to the GRI standards as a measure for the quality of the ESG report. And for the analyst coverage and behavior, we just use the information from IBAS. And for ESG incidents, we use the information from the RepRisk. RepRisk collects negative ESG the media news regarding to the ESG incidents. They also categorize and mirror those incidents from the different aspects, including the novelty, the influence, and so on. Okay, so we use a different mirror to show the impacts of the ESG incidents. The last one will be the stock price crash risks. So we just calculate stock price crash risk according to literature using the weekly stock returns. So this is a proxy for the negative information hoarding. That's all the data we use. Now let me just show you the results very quickly, okay? First, what's the real determinants? What's the determinant for the mandatory disclosure? We use the mandatory disclosure as the dependent variable. We found that in the common law countries, the government has a higher likelihood to issue the mandatory disclosure, which is consistent with the findings in Leon and Rinenberg 2017. And we also find that firms with high carbon emission had a higher likelihood to issue the mandatory ESG disclosure. Means when the climate change pressure is higher in those countries, so they have a higher likelihood to issue those kind of policies to regulate the companies in this country. Now we'll switch to the real effects of ESG, the real effects of mandatory disclosure on the ESG report. First, we will look at we'll just conduct some universal analysis by comparing before and after. So we'll look at the percentage of firms that fails the ESG report. So we find that we can see, according to the first figure, the figure on the top, we can see a significant increase of the percentage of firms that file the ESG report after the implementation of mandatory ESG disclosures. So largest change occurs in South Africa, Spain, and so on. So In the figures at the bottom, we look at the percentage of the ESG report complying with the GI standards. We use this measure the quality of the ESG report. We find that so the quality of the ESG report seems to increase dramatically. It seems to increase after the implementation of ESG of the mandatory ESG disclosure. So this is just universal analysis. Since there are lots of variables will affect the likelihood to file the ESG report and also the quality of the ESG report. So we have to control them. So this will be the multivariate analysis. In this multivariate regressions, we control the firm level, country level, industry level variables. So we find that after the implementation of mandatory ESG disclosure, the number of the ESG report increased significantly. So according to the regression results, so about the likelihood to file the ESG report increased about 2.7%. Well, if we use whether the report comply with the GI standard, we find that there's no significant results. For example, in the column 3 and column 4. So this is very surprisingly. So that means the implementation of mandatory ESG disclosure does not significantly increase the quality of the ESG report. Then we will look at some firm level heterogeneities. So we find that the firms with regarding to the availability of the ESG report, we find that this impact will be more pronounced in the smaller firms and the firm with poor ESG performance. So if a firm with a poor ESG performance, maybe they don't have the ESG report before the implementation of this kind of regulation. So after the implementation, they must do something, okay? They must prepare an ESG report. So this will show a more pronounced impact for the smaller firms and also firms with poor ESG performance. Well, regarding to the standards, regarding to the quality of the GI standards of the ESG report, we find that this impact will be more pronounced for the firms with for the big firms and the firm with a higher institutional ownership. So maybe for those firms, after the implementation of ESG standards, they try to distinguish themselves with other firms by increasing the quality of their ESG reports. Okay. Now the next one would be the analyst behaviors. So we find that after the implementation of mandatory ESG disclosure regulations, we find an increase of the accuracy and the decrease of dispersion, which is consistent with our hypothesis. So that means the implementation of the mandatory ESG disclosure do increase the information environment according to the performance of the financial analyst, which will facilitate the ESG information flows to the financial analyst, which can increase their accuracy and reduce the dispersion. The next one will be the ESG incidents. So we find that the likelihood, the number of the ESG incidents and the novelty of ESG incidents and also the influence of the ESG incidents all decreased after the implementation of mandatory ESG disclosures. So this is consistent with our conjecture. So that means after the implementation of mandatory disclosure policies, it will display the managerial behavior and reduce the misconducts of the misconducts regarding to the ESG issues. So that results in less negative ESG incidents. That's exactly what we observe here. And the last one would be the stock price crash risk. So we find a decrease of stock price crash risk after the implementation of mandatory ESG disclosure. Although the magnitude is statistically it's not very significant, it's only marginally significant. But this will also show the improvement of the informational environment, especially facilitating the negative information flows after the implementation of mandatory ESG disclosure. Okay, so that would be all the evidence we documented in these studies. So to conclude, so we find that mandatory ESG disclosures increase the availability of the ESG report, but not the quality. Well, for the firms with lower ESG performance, or for small firms, it will increase the quality or enhance the impacts of mandatory ESG disclosure on the availability of ESG reports. So most importantly, we find that the mandatory ESG disclosure reporting has in turn a beneficial effects on firms' informational environments. So particularly, we look at the financial analyst, we find that the accuracy of the financial analyst increased and dispersion decreased. We also look at the likelihood, the number, novelty, and influence of negative ESG incidents. We find that the implementation of the mandatory ESG disclosure reduce those kind of negative ESG incidents. And lastly, we find that the stock price crash risk declines after the implementation of mandatory ESG disclosure, which shows that it will facilitate the negative information hoarding at a timely manner. Okay, that's all the findings in this studies. So thanks for your attention, and welcome for the comments and questions. Thanks very much.